Hey everybody, welcome back. Do not tune out because it is time to make a beer. I have been craving a lager. So I'm going to make a lager that I've never made before. So I had to go through my recipe building process. So this is going to be a Munich Helles. And the first thing I always do is look at the beer guide certification beer certification guidelines on, what the ranges are for making a Munich Helles in this case, like what gravity range and what ABV range, what color range, bitterness, all that stuff, right? Then I start researching what kind of fermentables, what kind of grains and stuff. So let us start with the grains. A German Helles is mostly Pilsner. For those of you who know me, I'm not a huge Pilsner fan, but that is what is generally used for this beer, and that is what I will use. So 5 pounds, well, let me go with percentages. It makes more sense that you can scale it. So I'm going to do 77% German Pilsner malt. I've got 10% German wheat malt. 7% American Munich malt. Now I would use German, but I have a giant bag. I buy Munich by the bag, like 55-pound bag. So I'm just going to use what I have, which is Great Western American Munich. And I'm going to use 3% Biscuit malt. I believe I have Dingman's Biscuit malt, if I remember correctly. There are options here. I think instead of using Munich and Biscuit, you could go with something else, but I liked this idea. And then I'm going to use 3% Melanoidin. I don't usually use Melanoidin, but generally speaking, the Munich Helles is actually Munich Helles is a decoction mash, meaning you would take some of it out, boil it on the stove, boil it down into a nice, amber, color, and then add that back into your wort. I'm not going to do that. That's not really a practice that's done much anymore, except for brewers that are trying to do historical methods and want to try it. I'm going to use Melanoidin to mimic that. All right, give it a little bit of that decoctionness without actually doing a decoction mash. All right, so that's the fermentables. All right, so I'm going to mill this all up. You can double mill it if you want. I haven't been doing it lately, though. And then it's time to get your water ready. Now, as a side note, I always add a couple of big handfuls of rice hulls to my grist. It just helps. In this case, I'm not too worried about a stuck mash because it is a brew in the bag, but it just helps with the water flow, I feel, through the entire mash when you're mashing. Also, it's not part of the actual fermentables in my list, but I always add about 5% of the grist with oats, rolled oats. In this case, I will also do that. And no, they will not cause cloudiness in my final lager here. It just adds mouthfeel and head retention. So yes, that would bring us to like 105% for the mash bill. But it's not really, you're not going to get a whole lot out of rolled oats as far as, sugars and fermentables. So I get my water up to mash temp. A word about that. So I'm mashing it at 147 degrees Fahrenheit. That's my mash temp. I tend to set my strike water to that temperature. I just have found that there's going to be a little bit of a drop of temperature when you mash in, but not enough for me to be too worried about it. It comes up pretty quickly, and I found that it's just way, way too easy to overshoot if you try to compensate, and then you end up with, it messes with your final gravity because you end up with mashing in at way too high a temperature because it doesn't drop as much as you think it's going to drop. Okay, so it's time to mash in. As I said, 147 degrees Fahrenheit. That works for me for my system pretty well. I know that I'll end up with around the final gravity I'm looking for. Obviously, every yeast is different. I've just found that 147 degrees on the claw hammer system yields me around the right attenuation and seems to work well. So that's what I'm doing. Okay, the mash is done. I do an overnight mash. So I mashed in last night, went to bed, got up in the morning, and it is time to drain the main grain. And so we'll do that and then start heating up the wort to a boil. Okay, the wort's at a boil. It is time to talk about hops. I've totally embraced first wort hops, which means that I'm going to do one single bitter addition of hops and no other hops for the full hour of the boil. So this is a Helles, and what's traditional, and I'm going to stick with that, is I'm going to use Hallertau Mittelfruh for my bittering hop. In this case, it's about 31% of the hop bill. I could tell you how much I'm using, but it wouldn't make sense unless you scale it. So look at the recipe, look at the IBUs, and scale it that way. This one is going to be 19.4 IBUs. So shoot for that for your bittering. And then for the flavor aroma hops, I'm going to throw those in as a dry hop. Now I could do a late addition, but here's what I was thinking. So there is a gentleman by the name of Brewing. Check him out over on Instagram. I don't have Instagram, but that's where he mostly plays. And he sent me some of his beer, and one of his beers was a Australian Pilsner, I think. And what I really liked about it is that it had a lot of hoppiness that you don't usually get with a lager. And I was like, dang, it was really good. Now, of course, the concern is if you over dry hop a lager, it's going to overpower. So I'm hoping that is not the case. I don't know his recipe. I don't know how many hops he used for. I'm assuming he dry hopped it. That's another guess, but we'll find out. So I'm going to dry hop with Tettnanger, which is another very common hop to use for a Helles. I am going to basically double the amount of hops. I think. Let me see. I'm looking at my. So let's say, don't go by this, but let's say I use an ounce for my bittering. I'm going to use 2 ounces for my dry hop. So 2 ounces of Tettnanger will dry hop about 3 to 4 days before I keg the beer up and call it good. All right, so it is the next morning. The wort is down to about room temperature. I'm going to transfer it to my fermenter at this point. So I'll use the pump from the clay hammer to transfer the wort into my fermenter. These days, I almost always use an all-rounder. I just like the fact that it is pressure rated, so I don't have to transfer it later, unless I have a real need to any other vessel. I can just serve right off of the fermenter as long as I'm drinking it within the next, month. So I'll transfer that wort, and then to chill it down, because this is a lager, so I'm not going to pitch yeast at room temperature. I am going to chill it down in my fermentation chamber, my little freezer, for like an hour to get it down to the proper pitching temperature, and we'll go from there. Actually, I lied. So before I do that, I didn't lie, actually. I skipped some steps here. Before I chill it down further, I'm going to aerate it first, and I'm going to add my yeast nutrients. So you do you, but I like to put the nutrient into the fermenter. That way none of it gets left behind in the kettle. And then I use my drill paddle to aerate the wort for about 3 minutes. Then I'll chill it down. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to prepare my dry hop so it'll sit. The way I do it, I don't have, the fermenter I have doesn't have like a hop bong or anything. So I'm just going to use the old try and true method of using sous vide magnets, little muslin bag, and I'll fill my 2 ounces, Tettnanger, and I'll magnet that to the side, the top of the fermenter. And that way, like 4 days before the end of the whole thing, the whole fermentation, I can drop it down into my wort. And if I'm very careful, sometimes I can use the magnet to pull the hops back up out of the wort. Okay, geez, I thought this is taking forever for some reason, but it is finally time to pitch the yeast. Like I said, I'm using Fermentis, Safe Lager, Safe Lager, however you want to say it. German lager yeast, W3470. There's another one, is it S23 is what it's sticking in my mind that you could use, but I did a lot of comparison between the two, and I feel like this is a better option for Helles. We'll see. So we'll get that pitched, and then we wait. All right, it's about 4 days before I'm going to move this beer into the fermenter. I already did my diacetyl rest. We're almost set here. It is time to drop the hops. Drop it like it's hop. Drop it like it's hop. I had to do it. I'm sorry. Anyway, we're here. We're good. Plenty of head retention on this thing. Nice white 2-finger head. It's not clear at all. So that's interesting. 1050 original gravity, 1006, so it was just slightly drier than I would have anticipated, so it ended up at a 5.9% ABV. The color is right, it's just that it's hazy. This one has some melanoidin, but mostly it was Pilsner malt. Did have wheat malt. Trying to think, yeah, I did put some oats. I put in oats for everything, but usually with a lager, it clears up for me pretty well. So this will be interesting how it sort of goes, as time goes on here. This fermented for a month and then sat in the keg for a week. So interesting on that. Okay. Interesting. Okay, pretty clean smelling. Like I said, for a lager, that's awfully hazy. Good carbonation, great flavor. You know what? I'm not sorry at all about that being hazy. I'll tell you what I really like about this. It's not bitter at all. Of course, there wasn't a ton of bittering hops, but it's not bitter at all. It's very biscuity. It's wheat. If you've had enough wheat beers, you start to really get a feel for that wheat, what the wheat flavor brings. And I really like wheat in a beer. Yeah, I mean, flavor-wise, this is great. I think once it clears up a bit, if it does, it would be a contender for sure. I mean, I think this is a great recipe for Munich Helles. So anyway, I think this is a winner. So sounds good to me. I'll be back next week for another video. I'll be back probably in about a month with a full brew video. And until then, go brew something. Cheers.